for some Q&A.
Okay. Okay, so preventive care grand rounds, we have today Dr. Bill Andress or William Andress. He is a good friend of mine. So Dr. Andress, I would summarize here. If I miss anything, I will ask Bill Andress, Dr. Andress to complement that. But he was graduating the preventive care program. He worked in Hong Kong. I remember he was working before I went there, and I follow his steps there in the health promotion department of the Hong Kong Adventist Hospital. Then he went to the Philippines and worked in the Adventist International Institute for Advanced Sciences. And then he came back to the United States and worked as a professor in Oakland University and then lately in La Sierra University. He is married to a Japanese lady, Mieko Hoshino, and he has a daughter that is a lawyer, as I understood, and she works in Oregon. He likes to climb the highest point of each state. Have you done that? Have you finished that?
Uh, I, I just came back from doing 3 of the lower points in the Midwest. 2 of them I hadn't done before. And my sister and brother-in-law are coming out here in June, and we hope to do some of the higher ones in the Southwest here.
Great. And then he likes bird watching and photography. So here is Bill Andress, and he is retired now, but he's always willing to talk to the group and share his experience. The objective is to have graduates here in the program to inspire the new ones and to give guidance to see what is the best way to promote our career in preventive care. Bill, you have the time. You can share your screen now.
Okay, thank you, Dr. DeSantos. Let me get my slides up here. Let's see, which one is it? That looks good. Okay, we're looking good. Hopefully everyone can see what I'm seeing.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So what I decided to do this afternoon is to share with you my own personal journey, and along with that, some lessons learned. When I look at this title slide, first thing that comes to my mind is, wow, Loma Linda has really changed since I was a graduate student there. When I was a student, the new medical center building was not there. The children's hospital was not there. This statuary of the Good Samaritan was not there. From Anderson Street, Stewart Avenue ran through the campus. The Centennial Building was not there. Rather, there was a geodesic dome known as Gentry Gym. Drayson Center was not there, and there's a lot of other changes that have taken place. And so I also understand that the curriculum has changed quite a bit since I was a student there. But there are 3 things that I want to focus on this afternoon. First, I want to give a little bit about my own personal background, and then the progress that my own professional journey took. And along with that, I would like to give some 3 principles for career success that, even though the world is changing rapidly, I think these principles are still viable. So, in brief, this is how my professional journey unfolded after graduating with my degrees in health education and then later on in preventive care. Uh, I initially was working in the School of Public Health in the Graphic Arts Department under Dr. Mervyn Harding with a program called Health Style Productions. From there, I worked in downtown Los Angeles with the Little Tokyo Service Center. Then I spent a year as a lifestyle educator with the Southern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists out of Glendale. And it was from there that I went to Hong Kong, then to the Philippines. And as Dr. Santos has also already mentioned, came back to the States and finished my career in the academic realm, first teaching at a state university in Michigan, and then finishing up my career at La Sierra University. During my graduate studies, there were two pieces of advice that I found played a significant role in my professional career. These two pieces of advice were very different from each other. In fact, one might find that they were in disagreement with each other. The people that gave this advice, both of them at one time or another ended up working at the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, which is the administrative offices of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The first piece of advice was, if you are going to work for the Adventist Church, you better learn to play politics. When I heard that, it was rather shocking to me. And unfortunately, in my career, I really never learned how to play politics. And looking back on it, I can understand what this individual meant by that statement. The other piece of advice was and this was given to me just before going to Hong Kong. In your capacity, you will sit on various committees and frequently be pressured to vote with the majority. But make it a principle to always vote according to your conscience, even though it may cost you. And through the rest of my career, I could not sit in any committee meeting without this advice running through my head. And I came to find out that this advice was indeed true, that looking back on my career, I see where sometimes I voted against the majority. And looking back, it probably did cost me in some ways. But at least I had a clear conscience. So as I go through the presentation, there are three principles for career success that I would like to intertwine into the presentation. And they are, first of all, get to know your professors. Get to know them both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Because as you go through your career, you will find that recommendations from your professors are very, very critical. Second, put maximal effort into every class. When I enrolled into the School of Public Health, it was with the idea of becoming a lifestyle educator. I wanted to help people lose weight, eat a healthier diet, become more physically fit, live a lifestyle that lowers their risk of lifestyle diseases. And yet, when I enrolled into first my Master's of Health Education program, I found that I had to take classes in statistics and research methods, in writing grants, in planning, evaluating programs. And not having a health education background, I couldn't understand why in the world I had to study this type of information. And so consequently, I probably didn't put as much effort into some of those classes as I should have. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And finally, be cognizant of God's leading and the opening of doors. I'm going to share some experiences which I believe couldn't have happened by chance. The odds were just too great against it. So first of all, let me give you a little bit of background in terms of my own personal life. I was born in Washington Adventist Sanitarium in Tacoma Park, Maryland, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I was the middle of three siblings, an oldest sister and a younger sister. 23 years after my birth, I found myself graduating from what at the time was Columbia Union College. It's now Washington Adventist University, again in Tacoma Park, Maryland. And the campus was located right across from the hospital in which I was born. And so here's a picture on graduation day with my two sisters, my parents, and at that time, my only remaining grandfather. My other three grandparents had already passed away by this time. I was thinking back today, and it suddenly dawned on me that three of my four grandparents died in their 60s. And if you look at this photograph, you can probably tell that obesity, well, let me put it this way, that my parents were trendsetters in the field of obesity. Because if you go back to 1975 when I graduated, obesity was very, very low in the United States at that time, except in my family. And so if I look at my genetic background, it wasn't all that good. Now, if you've never been to Washington, D.C., I advise that you put it on your bucket list of places to visit. And if you're going to visit there, I recommend that you do it in early April when the cherry blossoms are in bloom. As you go on a tour of Washington, you will come to the following building. And even though I was born in Washington or in Tacoma Park, just outside of Washington, D.C., and spent my undergraduate years there, and actually for a couple months even worked in Washington, D.C., for some reason, I was never invited to live in this house. As a matter of fact, my childhood was spent in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I come from rather humble beginnings. Both my father and grandfather grew up in Philadelphia. My beginnings were quite humble. The suburb that I grew up in was Warminster, and there was a subdivision in Warminster called Lacey Park. The locals gave it a rather derogatory name, calling it Lazy Park. There may have been a good reason for that. But this was a World War II housing development that had been built for military families. There was a naval air base located about 2 miles from this development, and that is where my father worked as a civilian. This photograph was taken a number of years ago. I put it in here to give an idea of what the houses, the material that the houses were constructed of at the time that I was growing up. The houses were basically made of cinder blocks, and this administration building still maintains the facade of the housing at the time that I grew up. Well, a number of years ago, I went back to that area, and there had been a tremendous renovation of the houses in that housing development. When I was, and in fact, you're looking at the home that I lived in when I was a teenager. Small 3-bedroom house. I would guess it wasn't more than a maximum of 1,200 square feet. Imagine this building being comprised of cinder block. Over the years, they covered these buildings with vinyl siding, which gave it a vast improvement. There were no shutters on the windows, no railings on the steps going up to the house, no mailbox out at the street. The mailboxes were located next to the front door. The heating system was by coal. This, let me see if I can get a pointer here. This area here, which is now a storage area, this was a coal bin. And in the winter, we would have to have the coal company come and fill the bin with coal. And then one of my jobs growing up was to shovel the coal into the furnaces to heat the house and hot water. But like I said, there's been a great improvement. They've switched from coal heating to gas heating now. And here we see a picture of the actual street that I grew up on. Perhaps the environment that I grew up in had an influence on my decision to become a pastor. Maybe a driving force was the hope that one day I would be able to live in a heavenly mansion. So from the time I was around 11 years old, it was my dream to become a minister. But on graduation day, there is only one problem. None of the conferences that I had interviewed with were willing to give me a sponsorship within their territory. The major problem was I wasn't married, and I had no prospects in the immediate future, as at that time I didn't even have a steady girlfriend. So what do? You've graduated with a 4-year degree in theology. Not a lot of job openings if the church is not interested in hiring you. So I had been a student missionary to Japan. I had kept contact with some of the people that I had been associated with over there. And one of my friends said, hey, the company I'm working for is looking for English as a second language teachers for their company. Are you interested in coming back to Japan? Well, I needed a job, so I returned to Japan, and in the process, I met the girl who I ended up marrying. As an aside here, this is a picture of my wife's family and the members of the wedding party. This man right here, I felt very fortunate to be able to have him sing for our wedding. He was working as a student missionary in Japan at the time. Many of you may be familiar with the name of his brother. His brother is Whitney Phipps, who is a world-renowned singer. And this was his brother, Wendell. So we felt very fortunate to be able to have him sing at our wedding. But 2 months after we were married, I was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And at that time, it was one of the leading causes of death in Japan. I was put on some strong drugs and was told I would have to take them for a minimum of 2 years. Well, my wife and I began studying the Ministry of Healing and Counsels on Diet and Foods by Ellen White, one of the founders of the Adventist Church. And we began to make changes in our lifestyle, especially our diet. Within 6 months, my doctor said, I am taking you off of medication. You do not have to see me anymore. Your tests are all negative. I was convinced that the lifestyle changes had as much to do with my healing as did the medication. So I decided that I wanted to go back to school and learn how to teach others how to be well. But what did I know about health? I had avoided studying the sciences. Remember, I was going to be a minister. So when we went back to the States, we spent the first year at a self-supporting lifestyle institute in northwestern Georgia called Wildwood. From there, I matriculated into the only Loma Linda University graduate program that I could qualify for with my limited science background, and that was an MPH in health education. Well, at the time, I could get a dual degree with shortening my overall program, not only in health education, but one in religion. And so I decided to do that combined program because, after all, I was still going to become a pastor, but now my focus was on becoming a pastor with an emphasis in health ministries. Now, at the beginning of my presentation, I showed you a little bit about, or I talked a little bit about how the campus has changed since I was a student there. Well, so has the School of Health. That is what the School of Public Health looked like back in the 1980s. And I'm sure none of you have seen that water tower standing on the hill behind the School of Health. So sometime, I think it was in the 90s that this was taken down. But when I was a student there, pilots flying at night into Ontario Airport would use a beacon on top of that water tower to align themselves with the runway at Ontario. Now, during my studies from 1979 when I matriculated to 1988 when I finished my doctorate degree, looking back on that experience, there were a couple of occasions where I could see God definite leading in my professional career. And to me, one of the most amazing was when I was working on my doctoral research for my degree in preventive care. I had decided that I would go and do a 3-month internship in Japan. And while there, I was going to do my doctoral research. And the topic that I was looking at was self-efficacy theory and smoking cessation, a cross-cultural pilot study of a Japanese cohort. At the time, self-efficacy theory was a relatively new concept. It had only been in the literature for about 3 or 4 years, and at that time, most of the research was being done on smoking and weight management. Well, in my literature review, I discovered that most of the research had been done on white Caucasian populations. And so my advisor in Japan suggested that we do this study and look at whether or not self-efficacy theory would be effective with an Asian population. The research at the time indicated that questionnaires at the end of a program could be highly predictive of who would and who would not relapse within the next 3 or 4 months. And having this information could be very valuable because then you could give additional intervention to people who were less likely to be long-term non-smokers. Well, I decided that I really needed to have 3 literature reviews in my dissertation paper. And that would include an overview of smoking issues and the disease profile of Japanese trying to quit smoking, an overview of how self-efficacy theory was being used currently from the literature, and then data that related to various stop smoking programs and their success. As I did my research, now you have to remember, this is back in the days before even PC computers, let alone the internet. PC computers were just in their infancy. And during research at that time was very time consuming. The best data that I could come up with data on the Japanese was about 10 years old. And I thought, boy, my committee is never going to accept this for a doctoral paper. I need to have more current data. So when I arrived in Japan, I was hoping that I would be able to get more up-to-date data. Sitting in my supervisor's office one day, I saw he had a booklet that was a compilation of papers that had been presented at a smoking symposium about 3 years earlier in Nagoya, Japan, which is where my wife is from. And there were two authors listed as editors of this compilation. And so I thought, well, maybe I can have an interview with one of these men and maybe they can direct me as to where I can get some of this updated information. So I wrote a letter to one of the individuals, got a letter back saying, I'm going to be out of town during the time that you're here. I suggest you get in contact with my colleague, Dr. Tominaga. Well, it was too late to try to get in contact with him before I left. So I just decided, well, I'll go against Japanese protocol and see if I can set up an interview with him unannounced. So I got directions from my father-in-law to the Aichi cancer clinic where he was working. I got there. The complex was huge. My Japanese was very limited. So the first thing I did when I walked in was asked if they had anyone there who could speak English. A few minutes later, they introduced me to an individual who I quickly decided that their English was about as good as my Japanese, which meant I was in trouble. They took me through the building, finally found the office that I was looking for. Man came out of his office and he said, how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm looking for a Dr. Tominaga. He said, I am Dr. Tominaga. I said, well, I'm a graduate student, and I knew that nobody knew about Loma Linda. So this was just a couple of years after the baby Faye infant heart transplant using a baboon heart, and that had made worldwide news. So I was going to explain to him that I was from Loma Linda. You might not have heard of it, but that's the institution where this baboon heart transplant took place. As soon as I mentioned Loma Linda, though, he interrupted me and he said, I know Loma Linda University very well. Dr. Roland Phillips is a good friend of mine. And I about fell on the floor. I was so shocked because at the time, my wife was working for Dr. Roland Phillips as a computer programmer. That was the entrance that I needed. This man was one of the top epidemiologists in Japan. And for somebody of his caliber, you don't just walk in unannounced. He gave me 2 hours of his time, even took me out to lunch. And at the end of our conversation, he said, next month, I'm going to Russia to present a paper on smoking and disease in Japan. This has the latest data of the smoking profile among Japanese. It is so new that it has not even been printed yet in any of the government publications. if you will promise me not to leak any of this data before I've had a chance to give my paper, I will share the paper with you. And so my doctoral thesis here had data from Japan that was cutting edge. It was less than 6 months old. The only way I can explain it is a miracle, because the odds of something like that happening are very great. So let's talk for a moment about getting to know professors. In my master's program, the very first class that I had was at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was taught by Dr. Mervyn Harding, who was the founder of the School of Public Health and its first dean. And I believe that this class that I took from him was the last time that he taught it at Loma Linda, because he was getting ready to retire. I never realized that at that time, a few years later, I would find myself working for him with a grant program that he had managed to succeed in getting, in which we had funding to produce audiovisual programs for health educators. Now, again, you have to remember that this is long before anyone even thought of PowerPoint presentations. And to make a slide program using 35 millimeter slides was very time consuming. And so we made programs that were on average between 15 and 20 minutes long, approximately 80 slides per program, with a cassette tape that would play automatically. So all somebody had to do was push a button at the appropriate times to change the slides. And we began to market these worldwide. In fact, I was very delighted to find when I went to Hong Kong, they had a complete set of these programs that I had worked on. And then when I went to the Philippines, again, they had a complete set of these programs. After I came back to the States, I began teaching in a program that I felt was very similar to the Doctor of Public Health and Preventive Care program, only on a bachelor's level. That was a new program being introduced at a state university in Michigan called Oakland University, located about 40 minutes north of Detroit, Michigan. And during my interview process, the dean of the health science program asked me, "Do you happen to know Dr. Joyce Hopp?" Now, keep in mind, this was a secular institution a couple thousand miles away from Loma Linda. And when I told him that I knew her quite well and that she was one of my instructors, I found out that he had gotten acquainted with her and had actually worked with her on a number of committees at various conferences that he had attended for educators in the health sciences. So this is just another example of having a good relationship with your instructor. I don't know, but my guess would be that he actually contacted her when they were evaluating whether or not they wanted to offer a position to me. Going to the second principle, and that's maximize learning in each class. There came a point when Dr. Harding's funding dried up and I was out of a job. And so it was a few months, as I recall, before I had an interview at the Little Tokyo Service Center in downtown Los Angeles, where they were actually looking for someone to run their smoking education programs within the Japanese American community. And during the interview process, one question they asked me was, what is your experience in writing grants? I had absolutely no experience except for a class that I had taken in grant writing. And in that class, we had been given the option of either working on a real grant or making up a fictitious situation and drawing up a fictitious grant. Thinking that the second option was the easier of the two, I opted for the second. And had to admit to them that I didn't have much, or basically I had no grant writing experience, but I had taken a course in it, and I felt confident that if that were part of my job description, I would be able to do it. Well, the man in the middle here, Bill Watanabe, was my supervisor, and came to find out that he was a very, very excellent grant writer. And so during the little over 2 years that I worked here, about 50% of the grants that Bill and I wrote together got funded. Then the Southern California Conference asked me if I'd be willing to come and work with them, and would I write a grant for them? And I told them that took a lot of work, and I couldn't guarantee that it would get funded, but I agreed to write a grant for them. It got funded, and during that year, the Southern California Conference ran something like 34 stop smoking programs. They were delighted because they had never run so many in their entire history. Well, from there, I still had a desire to go back to Japan. It was becoming obvious that I was not going to go into pastoral work. And one limitation, though, to going back to Japan was my limited Japanese ability. And so when an opportunity came to go to Hong Kong, we jumped at the chance. Oh, I'm sorry. I had one other slide in here. Another class that I really didn't put a lot of credence into was research. And then at La Sierra, I had to teach a course in, it was an introductory course in research methods called Critical Scholarship in the Health Sciences. And as a result of what I was teaching in that class and encouraging students to participate in a conference where the organizers encouraged student participation, one year we had 20 students from my class presenting posters at this conference. So going back to Hong Kong then, Dr. DeSantos will recognize this picture. It was home to him for a number of years. Like he said in the introduction, he followed in my footsteps. And here again, in Hong Kong, I had to utilize classes that were among my least favorite. The one that comes to my mind especially was administration in health education, because I had an administrative position in the hospital there, running a department of health education and wellness, in which we ran a whole spectrum of community health education classes, going from stress management to first aid, CPR, stress management, weight management, stop smoking. And my favorite was running a marathon training clinic. After my term finished there, I wanted to get into academia, and took a position in the Philippines working at the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies, teaching graduate courses, mostly Asian students, but we had students from really around the world. And some of my requirements involved going to some of our off-campus courses in places like Japan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. And then finally, I finished my career at La Sierra University, which at one time was actually a part of Loma Linda University. And so looking back on where my professional career took me, I see retirement as kind of boring because my career took me from the excitement of Hong Kong, and we were there when the handover back to the Chinese took place in 1997, to some of the most impoverished areas of the world that I have visited. This happens to be one of the slums in the Philippines. I also visited slums in countries like Bangladesh. But then it also took me to places like China, where I had the privilege of having a dinner inside the Great Hall of the People, which many Chinese themselves have not been inside this building. I was there for a conference, and the conference organizers had been able to arrange for us to have a dinner inside this significant building in China, to the wet markets of Hong Kong and the Philippines. In my career, I think the Lord has brought me in touch with people who I never expected to have contact with. One of the most significant being a former president of the Philippines, Dr. Joseph Estrada, meeting with him in the equivalent of the White House, and teaching groups of ministers in Indonesia, enabling them to get their MPH degree so that they could combine health ministries with their spiritual work. And so that brings us full circle back to Loma Linda University with a final story. An individual that had a great impact upon my life while I was a student and later during my professional career at Loma Linda was Holder Crooks. Many of you may not know the significance that Holder Crooks had in Loma Linda. You probably remember her most familiarly with the park that is named in her honor. But it was my privilege to climb mountains with her. And back in July of 1987, I was with her when she became the oldest American and the oldest woman to have climbed Japan's highest mountain, Mount Fuji. And then just 6 weeks later, she broke her own record atop of Mount Whitney as the oldest person to climb Mount Whitney. To my knowledge, these records still stand. She did them both at the age of 91. And so currently I am trying to get a book out on her life. I believe I am one of the few people left who intimately climbed with her. And I feel that if I don't tell her story in a few years will pass into oblivion. And so I have submitted my manuscript to the School of Public Health. When you see Dr. Marshak or Dr. Johnson or Dr. Sabate, Dr. Nish, please encourage them to get this book published. I am asking them to see if they will work with me in getting this book published. So Dr. Harding and Holder Crooks were two of the most significant people who had an impact on my life here at Loma Linda. There's one last story about God's leading at La Sierra University. So I was working at Oakland University in Michigan and felt impressed that I should get back into working with the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. I found out that La Sierra University had an opening in the health science area. I read the requirements. I felt that I met the qualifications and so submitted my application. Shortly after I submitted my application, I got an email from the chairman of my department at IS in the Philippines telling me that he was considering coming back to the States, had heard there was an opening at La Sierra, and was wondering if I would write a letter of recommendation for him. I responded by saying I would be very happy to do so, but felt that it would be a conflict of interest as I myself had just applied for that position. Later on, he became the chair of the health education department at what used to be Canadian Adventist University in Alberta, Canada, and has finished up his career there. Later on, I found out that there was another individual who also applied for the position that I got at La Sierra, who was told that that position had already been filled. And to see how God leads in different lives, I'm sure you might have heard his story before, because I know you're very familiar with this individual. So Dr. DeSantos has not only followed me to Hong Kong, but he also followed me to Southern California. And I'm sure that the Lord had a much better position for him at Loma Linda than at La Sierra. So I thank you for the time to share with you my experience. I wish you the best. And I want to encourage you to really get to know your professors, to put effort into your best effort into every class, because you never know which class may be important in your future career. And then in whatever you do, look for and appreciate God's leading in your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was great. I don't know how you got that picture. I even don't know. I even don't have that. But
I'll send it to you. It was at one of the update meetings.
yeah, I remember very, very, very clearly when I applied to La Sierra, and then I talked to Rob Thomas on that time, and he was positive. He was very positive, and then he never returned to me. And then he passed 2 weeks. I decided to call him from Hong Kong. And on that time, we didn't have WhatsApp, so the call was expensive. And then I talked to him, and he said, well, we have here a guy here that we already interviewed, and then I'm sorry. And we were very disappointed because we would go back to Southern California, and so we have our kids there, and we have our house there in Redlands. So that was hard. But then in a few weeks, we got another call, and so we understood how God guides us. Huh? That was something. The
Yeah,
other guy, the other guy was Zirgan, is that right?
yeah, yes,
Klaus Zirgan.
Klaus,
Yeah,
Klaus.
Klaus
Yeah.
Zirgan.
Speaking about Dr. Thomas, here again, something important in terms of people that you interact with. I found out that after I started working at La Sierra, that Dr. Thomas is married to the sister of a man that I worked with in Hong Kong. His brother-in-law was in charge of the radiology department when I was there.
Ah,
So again, I'm sure Dr. Thomas talked to his brother-in-law before making the offer to have me come and teach there.
small world. Huh? Okay. Well, I have a few questions here. The first one is that as you work for two worlds, I would say one is the Adventist world and then one is non-Adventist. So you mentioned that you have to get used to the politics when you work for a church and specifically the Adventist health, the Adventist church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But you work for Oakland University, so what would be the difference? Did you have to get used to the politics also outside of a church environment?
Yeah, interestingly enough, in academia, I found the politics to be quite similar. Outside of academia, I found the politics to be greater within the church.
Mhm.
So I can compare, my work with La Sierra and Oakland, and the politics were very similar, which kind of surprised me because I didn't expect La Sierra to be so politically oriented, especially if you're on a tenure track. There is a lot of pressure to to uh, get on the right side of certain people. The outside of academia, when I worked with Little Tokyo Service Center, I could compare that with working at the Southern California Conference because I was doing similar work. In both cases, I was working in stop smoking programs. And I would say that Little Tokyo Service Center, in terms of the politics, was one of the best places I ever worked. They were politics was not an issue with them. Their focus was on helping the community, and whatever you could do to help the community, they were open to it. And the people I worked with there, uh, probably the least stressful job that I had in my career, uh, outside of working for Dr. Harding. That also was a low stress job. But the biggest stress in working in Los Angeles or Glendale was traveling back and forth because I was living in Loma Linda at the time. 60 miles round trip. I mean, 60 miles one way. Sorry.
Thank you, thank you. Another question. Did you anticipate when you graduated that you would be a professor, a university professor?
No, no. As a matter of fact, uh, now I think in the doctoral program, uh, you require students to submit their dissertation for publication. At when I went through the program, there wasn't an emphasis on research. The emphasis was getting a clinical background, and so research was not even on my level of interest, much to my regret now, because when I look at my doctoral dissertation, I probably could have had 3 or 4 publications out of it because it was a pilot study and it had some rather groundbreaking information in it. Uh, so that was the farthest from my mind. But after working in various capacities of health education, I felt that my greatest contribution could be rather than during community health education work, if I could be in a position where I could train other people, I could reach more people that way. And so uh, at the time that I was preparing to come back to the States, leaving Hong Kong, the GC informed me that they were desperate for a teacher in the Philippines, and would I please consider going there?
Good, 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 good. Lisa, if you need to leave, that's fine with us. So we will continue a few more minutes. So we will continue asking a few questions to Dr. William Andress about his experience. And I was, yeah, when you mentioned about the government of the Philippines, you know that he went to the Hong Kong Adventist Hospital. I met him there
Yes, I was going to ask, were you there
afterward.
when he had his operation?
Yeah, yeah, I was there.
There's an interesting story behind that.
Ah,
Uh, when the reason I got to meet with him is his wife was very favorable towards Adventists, and she was involved with a lot of projects that the Adventists were doing. So he had a very favorable view of Adventists, and the director of the uh, division made arrangements with him to have an audience in which they wanted to ask him to pass legislation to ban the sale of tobacco to individuals. I think it was below the age of 18. At that time, a child, 7, 8 years old, could go into a store and buy cigarettes. And
mhm.
also to ban any tobacco advertisement within, I think it was about, I want to say 100 meters of elementary schools and high schools. And so we had an audience with him, and I had the opportunity of being part of that group. This happened about 2 months before he was ousted. Uh, the uh, there were individuals who disapproved of some of the things he had done, and so over time they ousted him, and he was placed under house arrest. And then shortly after that, he was diagnosed with some very serious disease, and it was determined that the Philippines really did not have the technology to safely perform whatever uh, operation he needed. And so he petitioned them to go to America for his medical treatment. And the government in place at the time felt, wait, once he gets to America, he's not coming back to the Philippines. So they turned it down. And I guess then people in the Philippines did an investigation in terms of what might be viable options in Asia. And they decided that Hong Kong Adventist Hospital had the expertise to do what was needed.
Mhm.
And obviously they were right because the operation was very successful.
That was great. Okay, Bill, we thank you for coming. We thank you for sharing your experience, and we appreciate all of the advice for our students and for their career and for their profession. Thank you once more, and we'll see you soon in another opportunity, okay?
Okay. You have a good afternoon or
You too.
evening.
Bye bye.
Bye bye now.